So hi everybody, this is Henry Sevilla recording a video for my phonetics class at UCR, and today's topic is going to be suprasegmental processes. This is only going to be a quick glimpse or approximation into the big umbrella term of suprasegmentals, and let's talk about what it means. Let's begin with the prefix supra, which in English means either above or beyond, and segmental means segments, vowels and consonants. So suprasegmental processes involve anything that is beyond the mere study of consonants and vowels. And here we're talking about how some segments become assimilated in connected speech, how you delete certain segments in order when you're speaking fluently, and also how some vowels and consonants become neutralized, and so on and so forth. I'm going to move my camera to the right here, and let's dive in. The first phonetic process or suprasegmental process we're going to study is assimilation, which is simply a change. What happens here is that two segments or one segment sometimes, they take the characteristics of a neighboring sound or segment. It occurs both within words and across boundaries, word boundaries. And there are three types of assimilation. Yes, those are progressive, regressive, and coalescent assimilation. Progressive assimilation is also called forward assimilation. Regressive assimilation is called also backward assimilation, and coalescent is called reciprocal assimilation also. In order for you to help you remember what assimilation is, think about the word simulate. Think about this or simulation, and it means, or it suggests the word similar. So two sounds becoming similar to one another, or one sound becoming more like another sound, which is close to it. Okay, cases of progressive or forward assimilation. What happens is that the conditioning sound is before the assimilated sound. And in this case, what we have is the conditioning sounds in red, and then the assimilated sound in boldface here. So in the simple present of ask, if we put that in past tense, you will see how the conditioning k sound makes us pronounce this as t. So asked. And as a matter of fact, the k sometimes disappears in connected speech. So you say, he asked me to go. Another example is lend. We know from previous courses that when you have a verb ending in d or t, then the sound that follows is id. So for example, lended, wanted, and so on. When you have a voiced sound at the end of a verb, then the past tense is pronounced as d. So the conditioning sound here would be the voiced retroflex here, and the conditioned sound would be how the ed is pronounced. In this case, d, roared. Same here. Live, the conditioning sound is v in red here, and the conditioned or the assimilated sound, I'm sorry, is d, lived. Another case here is this voiceless what's, and you have a z, which is a voiced interdental fricative. Then you have what's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem? So this and v became more like z. So that's a case of progressive assimilation. The second case is regressive or backward assimilation, and it's a much more frequent type of assimilation. It's more pervasive. It's everywhere. As compared to progressive assimilation. What happens is that the assimilated sound is right before the conditioning sound, which is after. Think about the individual pronunciation of have and to. What happens when you put all of that together in connected discourse? You end up with have to. So the v sound, which was voiced here, becomes voiceless. Another case is has and to. Individually, if you open a dictionary, you will see that this is pronounced has with a voiced alveolar sound here. But if you put it together, you end up with has to with a schwa here. And so on and so forth. Another case is handbag. If you separate hand and bag, you have a d sound here, which is a voiced alveolar sound, and b, which is a voiced bilabial sound here. But in connected speech, the d here becomes more like it actually disappears, and then you end up with handbag, right? And another case is his shirt. You have a voiced alveolar sound here, his, and then you have a voiceless fricative sound here. And so what happens is that these two sounds come together, and then you end up with his shirt. His shirt. No, not anymore his shirt, but his shirt. For example, his shirt is beautiful, his shirt is big, his shirt is small, and so on and so forth. And the third type of assimilation is coalescent or reciprocal assimilation. By reciprocal, we simply mean that the two sounds influence each other to make up a new sound or a new phoneme. The first and second sounds in a sequence and z and t and d or final alveolar consonant sequences such as ch and j are followed by an initial palatal sound. Remember that this J-like sound here is not actually a J, but a palatal sound. And so think about this. Is that you have a two sound here, which is alveolar, and it begins with a semivowel, the y sound. You put it together, and then you end up with an affricate sound. Is that your dog? Is that your dog? And another example is that what you think? So what you becomes what you. So is that what you think? Is that what you're saying? So that's reciprocal or coalescent assimilation. Another case would you come, the d here, which is a voiced alveolar sound, and the y here, which is a palatal sound. They come together to form a new sound in connected speech, and you say, would you come? Here. You end up with this voiced affricate sound. And that's a very common phenomenon that happens in fast connected speech, especially if you're relaxed. So those are the three types of assimilation that we have in English. And the next phenomenon is elision, which is also called deletion or omission. I always like to think about it in terms of omission because to me, at least to my brain, it's much easier to remember what it means. When I think about omission, you simply omit. And that's what it is about. It refers to when a sound or syllable is lost or omitted altogether. It can affect consonant clusters, weakly stressed syllables that are not specially missed, and words that end in an alveolar consonant and that are immediately followed by a word beginning with a consonant. And something you might want to keep in mind is that the faster the speech, the more likely that sounds and syllables will be omitted, right? Examples? You have the word potato, which has a schwa sound here, but in connected speech, you say things like, I like, there are lots of potatoes here. I'm going to say it again. There are lots of potatoes here, right? So this becomes deleted or almost deleted. Qatar is another case. Police is another case. Again, if you open a dictionary, you will see that the transcription is a p, a schwa, a l, and a lax a, and then an s sound. But in connected speech, that schwa, which is in the first syllable, might very easily disappear. So you might say things like, call the police. And police sounds almost like please, right? That's it. The same is true for when a weak vowel is elided before the syllabic, before the syllabic consonants l and n, such as in listen, and crystal. And also, very interesting, you might want to remember this well. Complex clusters are often omitted or elided in order to simplify the saying of a sound. Because think about an expression like this, George the Sixth's throne. That's almost impossible to say. And again, if you are speaking in connected speech, you say George the Sixth's throne. You delete or elide the th and this sounds here and end up with George the Sixth throne. Another case, sixth grade. Almost impossible to say in slow, careful speech, but you simplify that by sixth grade. Sixth grade. Almost as though this didn't exist. Another case, fifth treasure becomes fifth treasure, and so on. Another case is when you have a v sound before a consonant. So instead of loads of bread, you say loads of bread. Instead of lots of men, you say lots of men. Instead of bits of bread, you say bits of bread, or lots of chocolate, or lots of love, or lots of students, and so on. So you delete the v sound completely, and nothing will happen. Everybody will understand what you're saying. Alrighty. Here is another case. And what we have is that there is a loss of to or do when they occurred second in a cluster at a word boundary if the following word begins with a consonant. So you have the cases of east side. So you can perfectly delete the to here and say east side. So, and you connect it through a process called linking, which we're going to talk about in a minute. In blind man, what happens is that this disappears. Blind man, you don't say it. It's almost as though it were unreleased. Blind man. But to be more precise, I don't think we're unreleasing it, because when you have an unreleased consonant, what happens is that that it's not audible, but it's there, such as in doctor. The in doctor is unreleased, but it's there. You can barely hear it, but it's there. In this case, what happens is that this is omitted completely. The same is true for wild boar in connected speech. You can say, I saw a wild boar, and that disappears, of course. But when the following word begins with a vowel, the final to or do are never omitted, such as in blind eye. Okay, you put it together with the vowel here. Wild alligator. All right. And of course, you have the loss of unstressed medial vowels, such as in chocolate, every. You can also say every for emphasis, or, if you want to sound fancy, you can say miserable with a schwa here, but it's also very common for you to omit it and say miserable. And another case is the word restaurant. In connected speech, you can say things like, oh yeah, there is this little Italian restaurant just around the corner. Restaurant. Instead of there is this little Italian restaurant just around the corner, which is very slow and robotic, you could say again, I found this very nice little place. It's an Italian restaurant. It's an Italian restaurant. So deletion. That's it. One last case of omission that I want to talk about is the loss of the first non-initial in a word that has another in the following syllable. Might sound a little too surreal to you, but it's very simple. You have an here, and you have another one here. So you could perfectly delete the first one. And in that way, you end up with the pronunciation of February without the R. Of course, you can also say February. Actually, my favorite is without the R. I normally will say February or February. So here, instead of governor, you can perfectly say governor, or surprise instead of surprise. You can say perfectly literature and temperature, and this will allow you to sound much more fluent, more relaxed, and more natural. And here, I'm going to give you a side comment. Whether you delete or not will depend on your own identity. I know a lot of people say, no, I'm not really so much into deletion, because my personal identity is quite formal, and so I'm probably not too much into deletions. But I would argue that even when you don't think you delete, once you hit a certain degree of fluency in English or any language, it just comes out naturally. So you end up deleting whether you are aware of it or not. The last case is the loss of an initial H or sound in pronominal form, such as in ask her. So you can say perfectly, ask her to come instead of ask her to come. You can also say things like tell him to come, or help him to carry the boxes instead of help him. Help him. So imagine that there is nothing here, and you connect it and say help him, tell him, ask her. Number 3, linking. What's the difference between linking and omission? In linking, you cannot delete any words. What you do is you put them together. So linking can happen between consonants, such as in test. Let me think of a better example. Let me think about two different consonant and vowel. For example, you can say hand on, or hand in an assignment. Hand in. So you hand in an assignment. He lasted a minute. The event lasted a minute. Lasted a. So you have lasted, you have a d at the end, and then you have the syllable a, lasted a minute or lasted an hour. So you put it together and say, the movie lasted about an hour. The movie lasted an hour or two, and so on. So that's a case of linking. You link one segment to the other without deleting anything. But there is a very interesting case of linking that I want to talk about, and it's called the intrusive R, which is becoming more and more popular, especially in the northern side of the east coast of the United States, and and also in some variations of British English. I'm going to show you where that northern area of the United States is. It's this part of the U.S., which includes Philadelphia, Boston, New York, probably Maryland, and so on. So this part of the U.S. is quite famous actually for have speakers that tend to do intrusive R. And what happens with intrusive R is that they insert an R right after these words. So instead of saying I saw it, they say things like I saw it. There is no R really, but they do it. Instead of the idea of, they insert an R here, the idea of. Instead of I saw a film, they say we saw a film. Instead of law and order, they say law and order. Instead of draw a line, draw a line. And it's very common after a w sound, which is an approximant sound or a semi-vowel, when there is a w sound and a vowel sound next. I think it's here. Yes, consonants w and y can also be activated between two vowels. If you don't believe me, I hope you do. Go watch this video. It's a 3-minute video which will show you British speakers using the intrusive R. And as homework or as classwork, I want for you to repeat after the speakers doing the intrusive R. Notice that I'm not promoting this. I actually, if you ask for my opinion, I would say I am not particularly comfortable using an intrusive R, and I myself try to avoid it. But again, I think it's important that you are aware that this is something real, it's happening, and so don't be surprised. I don't want anybody being taken off guard when you see this in a movie or in a newscast or anything of the sort. The last case is a little more complex. I'm going to begin with neutralization at a more simple level. I'm going to go to, I'm sorry, I didn't have this ready. I'm going to go to my phonetics folder here and open my image of the vowel quadrangle for you. So neutralization can happen both in consonants and in vowels, but a clear example of vowel neutralization is when you have an I sound and you're speaking so fast that it becomes more like a schwa. I'm going to give you the word direction. If you look it up in a dictionary, you will find that it is transcribed with a lax A at the beginning. I'm going to type it here. I'm going to say direct. So there is a lax A here, as you can see, direct. Of course, you can also say direct. But if you're saying direct and you're speaking really fast, you might end up using a schwa here. So I'm going to say a sentence for you. Oh yeah, this is a direct representation of such and such and such. Direct. So I'm no longer saying direct, but direct. This is called vowel neutralization or vowel centralization, because what used to be a front vowel moved to the center of the vowel quadrangle. That's vowel neutralization. That is only context to explain also something called consonant neutralization, which is more complex. Another case of vowel neutralization is when the is followed by a vowel. The first vowel is supposed to be E, right? For example, the earth. However, the schwa is inappropriate because you use the schwa when you have a consonant. So, for example, the student, but not here because you have a vowel. In the onion, you have a vowel, so the schwa is inappropriate. And interestingly enough, the long E, well, the so-called long E is too long and too tense, and the last one is too lax, and so we need something in between E and schwa, and so we end up with this. The transcription is the onion. However, this tense E, which we're representing here, is not really a tense E. It's something in between the tense E and the schwa. It's something that could be placed somewhere between this and this, probably here, the onion, or probably here, I don't know. We would need to ask a phonetician to really place it in connected speech. But that's what happens. The so-called tense E is inappropriate, although we represent it phonetically, because we're speaking so fast that we don't say the onion, we say the onion, the onion. I'm going to give you a couple of sentences with that. The onion I bought is whatever, rotten. or the apple I ate is delicious, or was delicious because it's no longer here. I ate it. This is what happens in vowels. This is vowel neutralization. And the last thing I want to talk about is something that I'm not sure you have noticed. Actually, this requires a lot of awareness or a conscious awareness in order for you to notice. What happens is that when these plosives p, t, k, b, d, and g follow in syllable initial position, they become neutralized. In other words, they lose their consonant quality, which they originally had. The sound is difficult to place as one or the other. In other words, you no longer know if it's a p or a b because you're speaking so fast that that consonant lost its original quality. So it is only the convention of regular spelling that determines how we transcribe them. And so you have a word like spill, but if you're speaking really, really fast, you could say things like, yeah, they spilled the milk. And this p here, which was supposed to be a true p, is no longer a p, but a b. Of course, nobody would transcribe this because we know for sure that spill is something that has an p, an I, and a l sound. But so we transcribe it like this with a P because there is a spelling convention. But if you pay close attention to how native speakers pronounce it in fast connected speech, you will see how they probably will not say spill with an aspirated or true P, but they use a more neutral P, which sounds a little bit like a B. That's it. It's, again, consonants are being articulated so fast, not all the consonants, especially plosives, they're being articulated so fast that they lose their original qualities and sound like something else. I'm going to give you another example involving the word skill. Again, in isolation, I'm going to type it in my dictionary and say skill. You can perfectly see how there is a k sound here, right? That's the sound. You will never see a g sound here, but in fast connected speech, you can say something like, being a good soccer player requires a lot of skill. And that k sound lost its properties or its initial properties, and it sounds a little bit like a g sound. You shouldn't be too concerned about whether I'm going to be asking for these things. These are phonetic curiosities that we would like to share with you because, again, we're aware that some of you might be pursuing careers in linguistics in the future, or you might be taking master's degrees where the concepts of neutralization and centralization will be tossed around, and we want for you to be prepared. But in a nutshell, that's what neutralization is all about. One last little clarification here, or piece of clarification here, is that some books speak about vowel neutralization only. They don't speak about consonant neutralization. But if you want to get the complete picture, you should know that both vowels and consonants are subject to neutralization depending on how fast the speaker is talking. And I would say that that's the end of my talk for today. I hope it's not too long, and if it is, forgive me, and have fun. Thank you very much for watching.